Hey everyone, this is Lee with Mantis Mechanics, and today I want to go over two different punches from two different styles. One from Kung Fu and one from boxing. Stay tuned. I want to start off by saying that I'm a huge fan of boxing, and obviously I'm a huge fan of Kung Fu. I love both these arts, I love both these sports. The purpose of this video is to show you the differences between these strikes, point out some of their weaknesses and their strengths. Every technique has its flaw and every technique has its strength point. It's up to you to apply it. Now, before I made a video about the difference between a Kung Fu hook and a boxing hook, and I'll link that video somewhere around there. Okay, for this video I was going to do the Kung Fu straight punch versus the cross, but they were so similar that there weren't really any differences that made anything interesting about it, and I didn't think it would be a very interesting video. So instead I'm going to use the Kung Fu sun punch versus the boxing cross. I'll point out how to do them, their strengths, and their weaknesses. First off, let's talk about the sun punch. The sun punch is called a sun punch because the fist is held vertically like this instead of horizontally. When you hold the fist vertically like this, it looks like the Chinese character for sun. To throw the sun punch, you're going to get into a fighting stance, whatever that might be, but generally you want your one leg in the back, one leg forward, and knees bent. You're going to make a fist, keeping it vertical, come from underneath the chin, coming straight out, making sure that when you extend, you're not at full lockout of the elbow. You want a little bit of bend in the elbow, and you're intending to hit with the top two knuckles. So it's going to come from underneath the chin, strike out, come down as the next punch is coming. Just like this. Want to make sure to keep the elbows down and not let the elbows come up like this. Keeping the elbows down, shoulders relaxed, and punching just like this. This is a sun fist. The next technique comes from boxing and is called a cross. They call it a cross because it comes across the body. So the cross is thrown off the rear hand. So if my left foot is forward, my right hand is going to be the hand that's going to throw the cross. If my left leg is forward, I can't throw the cross off the front hand or that left hand. That would be considered a jab. So what I'm going to do is push off my foot, and that energy goes through my foot, into my leg, to my hips. My hips rotate, and I turn my hips over, and I turn my hand over, or pronate it, hitting with those top two knuckles, but this time my fist is horizontal. Okay, so I'm using my hips to generate power in this punch, and when I come back, I come right back to that chin. The sun punch can be thrown very fast, and since it comes from underneath the chin instead of from the side, it's a lot faster than the cross would be. Plus, it's easier to throw a succession of punches. So this punch is really meant to be thrown, not really one at a time, but a lot at a time, maybe like a punches in bunches. It's also sometimes called chain punching or machine gun punching. The idea is that you're punching a bunch at a time. This is the strength, one of the major strengths of the sun punch is you can throw a lot of them. Another point is that you don't need a lot of hip rotation to generate power. When I punch, I don't need to turn side to side big or pivot off my feet the way I'm going to have to in the cross. So this means that I can do this punch a little bit closer range. This is a mid-range punch, so I can be a little bit closer and still generate power. If I'm up against a wall, or if someone were holding on to me, let's say someone was holding on to my hips and someone else was coming at me, I could still sun punch without turning my body as much, not losing much power in my punch. So this is one of the strengths of the sun punch. Now the strength of the cross is power. Because you're pushing off your foot and turning your hip and getting your whole body behind the punch, the cross has a ton of power. In fact, the cross has been helping people get their Z's since before NyQuil was invented. Another strength of the cross is you can throw it while keeping yourself pretty well protected. So when I throw the cross, my jaw is protected here by my hand. When I throw it, my shoulder internally rotates and protects my chin. It's not down here like this where I can get clipped. My shoulder's here. Now, a big mistake that people make when they're first throwing this, when they see that shoulder protecting the jaw, is that they shrug their shoulder up like this. You don't want to bring your shoulder up like this because that's going to ruin your speed and your power. You want to keep the shoulder relaxed and let the shoulder roll forward, or let the scapula move away from the spine. So it goes like this, right? Here's the spine right here. The scapula goes like that and rotates forward, and that protects my jaw. So I can stay relatively protected or keep my jaw protected while throwing this punch. Like I said before, every technique has a flaw or a weakness. If there was a perfect technique that had no weaknesses, that's the only technique I would teach, and I would call it Lee's undefeatable technique, and I would charge a whole bunch of money to teach that technique. However, since no technique like that actually exists, you have to learn thousands of techniques or hundreds of techniques, pick the ones that you like, and get very good at those techniques, and know the counters and possible counterattacks to those techniques so you're prepared for them when they come. So the first weakness of the sun punch is that it's a mid-range punch. It's not going to be a long-range punch. You're not going to get a lot of distance out of it. You're going to have to be in this mid-range. So it's also a strength if you're in that mid-range, obviously, but I'm not going to be able to use it to feel out the way I would be able to use a jab or maybe a long cross, something like that. This is a mid-range punch. The second weakness of the sun punch is that it's thrown from underneath the chin. This leaves your chin exposed when you're punching up the middle to hooks or any round techniques that may come around. So this is why it's very important when you throw the sun punch to get an angle first. So when someone throws an attack, the idea is that you step off to an angle and then throw the punch instead of staying right there in front of them where your chin is exposed, possibly causing you to go into an unconcussive slumber or a concussive slumber. Unconcussive slumber doesn't make any sense, does it? So really, that's one of the weaknesses, is that that chin is not protected when you're doing this punch. And the last weakness is power. While the sun punch can have a lot of power, it's not going to be as powerful as the cross. The cross, you're putting your whole body behind, you're turning those hips. Everything we talked about in the cross is going to make it a more powerful punch, where the sun punch isn't going to be about that one-hit knockout power. Its strength is in punches and bunches and hitting you a lot of times, making it hard for you to block that punch, right? And making you more successful in landing that strike that is going to cause that knockout. One of the weaknesses of the cross is that it's generally not thrown by itself. It generally won't hit by itself because it's coming from here and you see the body turn. Now all this means that it doesn't have a likelihood of hitting very often against a skilled opponent, right? Usually you have to set it up with another strike. Most commonly the jab. The jab shields and the cross hits. So this is one of the weaknesses of the cross. Similar to the last weakness, the cross can't be thrown fast. Now, I know there's boxers out there that throw extremely fast crosses, but I am talking relative to the sun punch. When you throw, it's going to be very hard to throw bunches of crosses over and over again, right? Right? It's going to be very hard to get that much volume as you get with the sun punch. Now, some of you might go, well, what about the jab and the cross together? That's your 1-2 because you're using two hands with the sun punch. That is true, and the jab and cross, again, can be very fast, but relatively it's not going to be as fast as the sun punch because of that body rotation, that heavy body rotation. And if you're not rotating the body, then there's no power behind that cross anyways. So that's more like a throwaway jab or a throwaway cross where you're just using it as a distraction for another strike. And the last weakness is going to be hip rotation. You have to be able to rotate your hips fully in order to get any power out of the cross. The cross power does not come just like this. Unlike the sun punch, which can be thrown close in, you need some space for the cross. If the opponent moves to mid to short range, it's going to be very hard to throw a cross with power. There are exceptions to that, but for the most part, you're not going to be able to throw a cross with power in the short range. Each of these techniques has its specific purpose. You cannot use a sun punch like you would use a cross, and vice versa. It would be like using a hammer when you needed a screwdriver. Sure, you can use the hammer and pound that screw into a piece of wood, but is it really the best way to do that? So which technique do you prefer? Let me know in the comments below.